Imagine this. It's 1718. You're a French colonist who has just survived months crossing the Atlantic storms, disease, near starvation. You finally reach the Gulf Coast of North America. Now comes the most important decision of your life. Where do you build your city? You have options. High ground, stable soil, elevated riverbanks along the Mississippi that offer the same access to trade and transportation. But instead, you choose a swamp. Not just any swamp, but land below sea level. A place where the ground is liquid mud, where mosquitoes carry malaria and yellow fever, where heavy structures sink under their own weight. And you decide, yes, this is perfect. Let's build a city here. Stone cathedrals, brick buildings, multi-story masonry structures. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't to me, or to modern engineers. And the deeper I researched New Orleans, the clearer something became. The official story of its founding doesn't work. The geography is wrong. The timeline is wrong. And the technology required didn't exist. So what if the French didn't build New Orleans? What if they found it? A city that shouldn't exist. New Orleans sits in a bowl, literally. Large parts of the city lie 6 to 20 feet below sea level, lower than both the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. The land constantly wants to be underwater. The official explanation is subsidence, the gradual sinking of soil due to compaction over time. And yes, subsidence happens. But it doesn't explain the original decision to build here. I spoke with a geotechnical engineer who explained the soil beneath New Orleans is made of alluvial deposits, layers of clay, silt, sand, and organic matter, saturated with water. His words were blunt. Building anything heavy here without modern deep foundation technology is asking for failure. You'd need piles driven 60 to 100 feet deep to reach stable ground. That technology did not exist in the 1700s. Yet by the mid-1700s, barely 30 years after its supposed founding, New Orleans already had substantial masonry buildings. Stone, brick, heavy European construction. How? Foundations that don't belong. Early visitors to New Orleans describe buildings sinking, cracking, settling unevenly, but here's the strange part. They didn't describe total collapse. Some structures failed, others didn't, as if certain buildings had foundations that worked and others didn't. Architect Benjamin Latrobe, working in New Orleans in the early 1800s, wrote about foundation systems he observed, systems he didn't fully understand. He credited them to superior French engineering. But what if they weren't French? The cathedral problem. The St. Louis Cathedral dominates Jackson Square. It's the visual heart of New Orleans. Heavy stone, tall spires, massive weight. Preservation surveys from the 1900s documented something odd. The earliest foundations of the cathedral extend far deeper than expected and don't match known French colonial techniques. Yes, the cathedral has been rebuilt multiple times. The current structure dates to 1850, but elements of the original 1727 construction remain, and those elements show load distribution techniques unusually advanced for a frontier colony. One structural engineer reviewing historical drawings told me plainly, this design isn't wrong, it's just ahead of its time, or from another time entirely. Iron lays, decoration, or technology. Walk through the French Quarter, and one thing dominates the landscape: iron. Balconies, windows, doors, entire facades wrapped in intricate metalwork. They call it iron lace. It's said to be decorative, Spanish influence, but it's everywhere. Systematic, geometric. The iron connects building to building, balcony to balcony, roofline to spire, always upward. Iron is a conductor. When you wrap entire structures in connected iron frameworks, you aren't just decorating, you're building a system a Faraday cage, an antenna, or something we no longer understand. Old newspaper accounts from the 1800s describe strange electrical phenomena in New Orleans. Compasses behaving erratically, watches running fast or slow, lights in the sky during storms concentrating over the French Quarter, dismissed as superstition, voodoo folklore. But what if they weren't imagining anything? Metallurgical analysis of early ironwork reveals alloys and casting precision unusual for the period. Officially, it was imported from Europe. But what if it was already there? The water city. New Orleans doesn't just have a water problem, it is a water system. Modern drainage relies on massive pumps designed by A. Baldwin Wood in the early 1900s. His work is celebrated as revolutionary. But Wood didn't create the system from scratch. He mechanized something that already existed. Maps from the 1700s show an extensive canal network running through the city, organized, geometric, citywide, more Venice than swamp settlement. A hydraulic engineer explained to me that creating stable canals below sea level, surrounded by water, requires advanced understanding of pressure, erosion, and soil mechanics. Doing this with 1700s technology on that scale borders on impossible, unless the system was already there. Fort Pike and the geometry problem. 30 miles east of New Orleans sits Fort Pike, a star fort, perfect geometry, built in a marsh, officially constructed in 1819 using timber piles driven into mud. Yet the fort stands today while nearby modern infrastructure decays. Star forts appear all over the world, always precise, always geometric, always attributed to recent construction despite characteristics suggesting much older engineering traditions. And Fort Pike's location makes little sense militarily unless it wasn't built as a fort at all, unless it was repurposed, a node in a larger system. The World's Fair pattern. In 1884, New Orleans hosted the World's Industrial and Cotton Centennial Exposition. The main building covered over 33 acres larger than anything in the country at the time. Built in about a year, brick foundations, iron and steel, glass, then completely demolished. The same pattern appears in Chicago, 1,893, Street Louis, 1,904, and elsewhere. Impossibly grand structures, short exhibitions, total destruction. What if these fairs weren't showcasing new construction? What if they were clearing old ones? Cities of the dead. New Orleans buries its dead above ground. Officially, it's because the water table is too high, coffins float. But the oldest tombs are the most elaborate, architectural, house-like, and they're arranged in grids like streets. Early visitors described these cemeteries as ruins. What if they weren't tombs originally? What if they were the upper levels of buildings, left exposed after a flood of mud and sediment raised ground levels across the city? What if the dead are buried in the rooftops of a sunken city? The pattern. Individually, each of these details can be dismissed. Together, they form a pattern. A city below sea level that shouldn't exist. Heavy buildings on impossible soil. Foundations too deep for the era. Iron systems too systematic to be decorative. Canals too sophisticated for a frontier colony. Star forts in marshes. World's fairs that erase architecture. Cemeteries that look like neighborhoods. New Orleans wasn't built in a swamp. It was already there. A water city, a Tartarian Venice, partially submerged, partially buried. The French didn't build it. They occupied what remained above the mudline. They repaired what they could. They claimed what they found. And they wrote a history that made them the builders. America's Atlantis. New Orleans is not a myth. It's physical, walkable, still standing. The water constantly trying to reclaim it isn't a flaw, it's a memory. The city was designed to live with water, not fight it. And once you see it, once you understand what you're really walking on, you can't unsee it. The French Quarter isn't French. It's Tartarian. And New Orleans isn't a colonial miracle. It's America's Atlantis, still surfacing, still sinking, still telling its story to anyone willing to look.